So Texas
And
Kenny.
sometimes you
Oh,
don't,
go ahead.
yeah, sometimes you don't know until you see it. You get out there and see some of these videos and you see some really cool stuff, and don't always trust just because this one person you saw their presentation on pen testing, it looks boring. Some people explain it a different way.
So, some people just suck at presenting.
Yeah.
So Texas Kenny is somebody gave Texas Kenny my script for tonight. He says, "Are you afraid that AI has the potential to knock out a large portion of security jobs in the future?" Don't answer that one. We're going to answer that one when we kind of go into our next section. Like I said, somebody, and maybe Texas Kenny hacked my OneNote and stole my stuff for the stream tonight. So with that being said, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and head on over to definitely our next topic for tonight. Let's talk a little bit about kind of about artificial intelligence and things like that. And so, as with anything, I've got stats and things like that I go out and aggregate to try to keep the stream backed in science, right? And so, Trend Micro recently predicted that in 2021 they expect artificial intelligence to start to replace humans in cybersecurity all the way from now until about the time of 2030. So that's a small, little, minuscule 9 years away from now. Now we've already seen adversaries adapt AI technologies to accomplish things like their efficacy and phishing campaigns. There's one really good notable example that I do want to call out, right, which is the Wall Street Journal reported that a set of cyber criminals had employed AI-based software to replicate a CEO's voice to basically facilitate in a BEC or a business email compromise and transfer about $250,000 out of a UK-based energy company. And again, they used AI-based voice technology as part of this phishing campaign in BEC. And so my question to you, Philip, is now if we can agree, right, that pen testing and red teaming, should be making the best efforts to simulate real hacker TTPs. How long is it, do you think, before we start to see the use of AI in our ethical hacking training?
Yeah, I think where it's going to help is I think really it's going to help with the tools. I mean, I don't see anything in the short term. When you look at vulnerability scanners, they're not 100% foolproof. You see false positives. And when you look at web application pen testing, a lot of a lot of consulting companies dropped just using web app vulnerability scanners and went to like Burp Suite to do more manual testing. There is some vulnerability scanning functions in it, but one of the things we were finding, one of the companies I worked at, my first consulting job, we used Web Inspect, but there were so many false positives we had to rule out. In my next job that I was a consultant at, they had quit using the vulnerability scanners and just went with Burp Suite because there were so many false positives. So I kind of compare it to that. They had, it's hard to find a good vulnerability scanner that's doesn't have false positives. So I think what it's going to do is it's going to improve the tools. I think it's going to the low hanging fruit, the stuff that's really time consuming, that's kind of annoying. I think it's going to replace those things. But doing the more manual stuff, the more adversary emulation kind of thing, I think it's going to take more actual manual efforts. I think it's just going to help enhance the tools, but I don't see it replacing anyone anytime soon. Maybe like purple team engagements, uh, emulating, malicious actor, threat actor, emulating those things to test the responses. I could kind of see it on that part, but I really don't see it replacing anytime soon. Maybe it will at some point, but I haven't seen any evidence that it's going to totally replace everyone right away.
Let me pull on that just a little bit though, and before we get to that, I do see inside sources. Thank you very much for the 5 tier 1 subs, but you do see that you're outplaced on the leaderboard there, inside sources. I just want to point that out that you're getting outpaced on the leaderboard. Um, what do you think a world where we start to see AI into Metasploit or AI into our Cobalt Strike or AI into our Empire C2 and post exploitation frameworks? Do you think that we'll ever see AI into those mechanisms and those frameworks, or do you think those frameworks will still kind of stay true to heart and still be very manual in that regard?
I don't know, maybe not those directly, but I think a competitor for sure.
Hmm?
Someone that's a competitor to it, because one of the things, as you've seen over the years, how some of these tools have really eliminated the need to really have to be able to script. You
Hmm.
know, at one time you really needed to know how to do Perl or Python. Now Burp Suite automates a lot of things like brute forcing logins that doesn't require you to script things anymore. So I see some of the tools, and like the professional version of Burp of not Burp Suite, but I would say the professional version of Metasploit. Maybe if their competitors are starting to use AI, maybe they integrated that to make the tools better. If those tools don't directly do, I think their competitors probably will, because just seeing the different exploit frameworks come about. At one time, you had to manually exploit
Hmm.
things you didn't
Yeah.
have, things like Metasploit. So as things gone has evolved, it's like your vulnerability scanners and your other tools to automate and make things easier. I think it's just a matter of time before you start seeing some of those. And then it's just a selling point for someone to, try to beat out Metasploit for a sell of Metasploit professional, you know, because you see some of the places out there, like some of the different emulation tools. Because when I was working at the company, the consumer product company, we had several people trying to sell us products that they said could emulate red teaming, that we
Hmm.
could use that instead. And when you really dug down into it, it did some of those things, but it didn't really replace. It would be something that you could use along with what you're doing.
Yeah, and let's be clear, right? We've got I do want to kind of cover what you're talking about here in a little bit. There's a distinct difference between automation and using artificial intelligence, right? And machine learning and things like that to do it. So if an adversary is using AI to do phishing campaigns, um, do you think, again, getting back to skills to learn, and especially for even maybe some aspiring pen testers who are listening to this stream, or even some pen testers or red teamers that have been doing this for a while, do you think they should add artificial intelligence to their repertoire as they go about trying to add some level of that to some of the pen testing work that they do?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, because if you're one that's good at writing your own code and scripts and stuff like that, maybe you can learn AI and come up with ways to speed up your process.
In that same study regarding AI, they did find that 24% of IT leaders claim that by 2030, data access is going to be tied to biometrics and DNA data. So we're back on this biometric kick that we've been on for years, right? And of course, these IT leaders that they interviewed as part of this survey, right, are claiming that these biometrics and DNA data tagging and things like that are going to make unauthorized access impossible. Um, Now I know hackers and offensive security folks love to hear the word impossible when it's associated to something getting hacked. What's your thoughts on this, and what's kind of your thoughts on us continuing to say that biometrics and DNA data are going to prevent things from being hackable?
Well, I'm going to say my prediction, as it is always: you dare someone, they're going to say, "Hey, hold my beer," and they're going to figure out how to do it. Because, I mean, it's like, wasn't it John McAfee that had that one digital wallet that couldn't be hacked, and he
That's
said
right.
no one could hack it? Put it out
That's
there, and it
right.
got hacked. You put the dare out there, the right person takes up that dare. Someone's going to figure it out. You're going to slow down and improve on some things, but someone's going to figure out how to hack that. I mean, you figure hacking systems 20 or 30 years ago, it wasn't as complicated as it is now. Although we have tools to make things easier, but it's there's always someone that figures out how to do that.
I see the question on screen. I'll ask that question here in a second. I want to make a statement about the AI thing and kind of getting back to the question that was asked before about if we think that we're going to see AI push a lot of us out of cybersecurity jobs. Um, I guess I would almost take a stance that this is the modern equivalent of folks who are worried about robots replacing them on the product line. And I would say, if you're worried about AI replacing you in your cybersecurity job, maybe you haven't graduated to level two of where you need to be valued in your organization. Is that too harsh of me to say, or what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's good. And one of the things also too, if you're worried about AI, replacing it, just like you were talking about robots replacing jobs, get into AI.
Build the robots.
Yeah, look at people. There's all sorts of jobs in robotics. Yeah, so build the AI that's replacing you.
That's right. So that leads us, I think, to the question that did pop up on screen from G called 012 said, with that being said, is it necessary to know coding in cybersecurity?
It's not necessary, but it can be very helpful if you're a red teamer or a pen tester. It'll make you a lot better because you look at all the people creating the tools out there. They know how to code. You take a lot of these really talented people. They're able to create some script. This is how you're finding the O days and stuff. So if you're not wanting to find the O days and that sort of thing, you'll be fine. You can get by without it. A lot of these tools have made it easier to do it, but if you really want to be really good, then it's good to learn how to code, and don't let that hold you back from getting into the industry. You can learn coding as you go along, and then there's a lot of good pen testers that don't know how to code. But
So
so I hope that
on that,
answers your
I want to pick on that a little bit because I just caught inside sources say it out the corner of my eye, right? Coding versus scripting. What's the
yeah.
difference between coding and scripting, and kind of what's your take on, where do you need to be in those two arenas?
Yeah, coding, just to kind of simplify, like coding, you're writing programs, full-fledged programs, something that can be compiled. Your scripting is more like, you know, smaller one function type small programs that don't have to be compiled. So, I mean, most people, I mean, scripting is definitely, you should get to at some level in your security career. Coding, necessarily be able to write programs, you don't have to necessarily be there. Most people get by with just writing scripts. But one of the things I'd say as far as languages to learn that I would recommend is Golang,
Okay.
because you can compile it, and it's almost like a scripting language. It's got the simplicity of Python, but almost as powerful as C, because you can compile the code. It's portable, so you can create portable executables that you can compile it on Mac to run on Windows or run on Linux without compiling on those systems. So if you're wanting to learn a language, so you can kind of do some small programs scripting style and compile it in Golang.
So it's funny you mentioned that. I've had people. One of the common questions that we get asked when we start to venture down this coding and scripting languages is what are the three languages that you should learn? So I'll ask you this for everybody who's listening, because obviously I've given my take on this as well. If you had to list the top three, that you think a pen tester should at least familiarize themselves to, like a 100 level or a 200 level set with, what would be your three languages that you think are important for them to learn? Scripting or coding?
Yeah, I'd say scripting or coding, especially from a pen testing perspective, Python, Golang, and C sharp,
Okay.
because your enterprise environments are using using C sharp, and some of the PowerShell exploits aren't working, so more people are getting into the C sharp side of things. A lot of the environments are pretty heavy Microsoft, so I think that currently would be a good skill set.
All right. That's awesome. That's definitely vastly different than mine. Bash scripting, PowerShell, and Python for those three. I didn't think about the C sharp versus the PowerShell thing. So that's an interesting take on that. It's a good point. Good point. Question from chat. It's my understanding that biometrics just creates an underlying hash for the fingerprint. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I'm not real clear. I'm not really clear on that, but I would. Yeah, I'm really not real clear on the biometric stuff. So
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I'm not. I wouldn't know too much about that as well. That seems legitimate, but I think the math comes really when it comes to the underlying hash. I think the math comes in, the finite details either of your fingerprint or your eye details, or something like that. But yeah, I'm not overly familiar with that one either.
but as far as it being breached or something, it would be kind of like your captchas, because your captcha is supposed to secure things, but people find workarounds for captchas. So probably the same type of thing. You just have to make sure you've got a secure implementation of it. And
Well, and I think that brings up a good point, right? Because you look at Bruce Schneier, who's a brilliant mathematician, cryptographer, right? And he tells you, I think he's got a saying that says trust the math, right? It's never the crypto that fails, although there's been some cases of crypto failing in the past, but for the most part, it's the implementation of the crypto that ends up breaking. I think probably the same could be said for biometrics.
yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. Um, Heading back over to kind of back onto our topic on artificial intelligence. Um, Actually, I kind of want to move on to a different topic. And you'd kind of led into it a little bit, and it's really around this topic of automated hacking. And yeah, I use my air quotes with that one. And so when we talk about that conversation around artificial intelligence, and again, I said, let's not confuse artificial intelligence with automation, right? We see the rise of companies like SafeBreach, Attack IQ, Simulate. They've all broken into this industry with kind of this known as this breach simulation or adversary simulation tool. You even have companies like PCYsys, right? Who straight up claim to do 100% automated penetration testing. Do you view companies like this as an innovation in penetration ethical hacking space, or do you find them offensive and more blasphemous when you see them advertised the way they do?
I think, yeah, I think it could be good and bad. I think these tools could be leveraged for good, but I think the problem is the consumer education. A lot of these C-level executives or directors are going to hear this and they may believe it and buy it, thinking it's going to give them all this. That, in my opinion, from what I've seen, what it's going to do is this going to let you do some adversary simulation with less experienced people, but it's not necessarily really going to do what a true red team is going to do. And I think sometimes people get confused because one of the things I noticed when I was the red team lead at this company, that some of the managers and some of the people, the technical staff, didn't know the difference between a vulnerability scan, a vulnerability assessment, a pen test, and a red team engagement. So I think sometimes it's easier for someone to come in and explain this. Maybe they're not trying to be misleading, or they really think it's this, and someone buys that hook, line, and sinker, and they get this tool, and it's not really going to give them everything they need. I think these things could be used along with your manual pen testing and stuff to help things out, but I don't say I would really depend on it to totally replace pen testers.
With that in mind, I think you bring up a really good point too, right? Which is, these companies are obviously, maybe I'm being a little cynical about this, right? They're trying to ride that VC wave, or they're trying to ride that money wave that we have in cybersecurity, and so they're out there putting money behind their marketing efforts, trying to get in front of CISOs and make these as valuable tools and things like that to CISOs. Um, would it be fair to say that companies like this potentially pose a risk to our ethical hacking community because their voices might potentially be louder than, say, folks who are offering penetration testing consulting services and things like that?
Yeah, I think it could, because a lot of it's the consumer, the educated consumer. And being a security director or CISO, you can't be expected to know everything in depth. So someone comes along and really does a convincing demo, then you may pass on that and think, okay, I can get this product for $500,000 a year, and my pen testing needs are $1 million a year, and you're going to think, oh, that's a no-brainer, and not really see it as something to help enhance your program, but replace it. So I see where it could cause some confusion and possibly affect some companies getting some work, pen testing work, or prevent companies from building a pen test team because they think they can buy this tool to just automate everything.
What's the conversation? You're sitting across from me. I'm CISO of a Fortune 100 company, and I've got Attack IQ or SafeBreach here telling me that they can do my breach simulation or my automated penetration testing, and I've got you telling me that you can do it. Price not an issue. Price not an issue. Why do I hire a pen tester?
Well, with pen testers, you can actually get people that can come in that can actually perform an O day against it. I know some guys that are consultants that's actually local here in the Dallas area, that they've been on pen test and they've discovered multiple O day exploits. So your automated tool is not going to do that. It's only going to do what it's fed. So that sort of thing, there's some things that the automation may not find. I mean, that's just like when you're testing an application, it could be identical frameworks, same programming language and all this, but the developer puts it together that flows a different way. And, automation doesn't always take an effect that. So you need, the manual testing there as well, be able to go through the logic flow, the business logic of that application. So I'd say the same thing with a tool like this.
Yeah.
For up-to-the-minute cybersecurity news, make sure you follow and subscribe to the Cyber and Security channel on Twitch and YouTube. Also, make sure you turn on those notifications so that you know when we go live.